So this is a slightly unusual video screencast for this channel, which are mostly about statistical matters. There is a bit of statistics, but you'll see this is about one of my other hobbies primarily, that of angling. So just to give an overview of the talk, it's a study of my slightly obsessional attempt to explore scientifically two contentious and much debated questions in the angling fraternity. Is it easier to catch certain fish when it's warmer? And is the ability to catch those fish affected by barometric pressure, the atmospheric pressure? And to allow me to include a bit of statistics, this talk allows me to illustrate the use of some simple so-called Bayesian statistics, which are currently popular as an alternative to classical statistical analysis. So it's called the Zander study. This is because it's about a specific fish, the Zander, or as it's sometimes known, a pike perch. It's not actually a hybrid, but in England it's sometimes called a pike perch. That's what it looks like. And there's me catching one of my very first Zander, actually before this study started. Why should I look at these particular factors? The effect of barometric pressure. Well, if you read any angling book or online fishing forum, there's lots of speculation about how it does or doesn't affect feeding activity of fish and your ability to catch them. But sadly, I did quite a lot of scouring the internet and scientific databases, and there really isn't much proper scientific research. In fact, this study, which was a university technical report more than anything, was on the feeding activity of yellow perch and the potential influence on it of barometric pressure, was one of the most clearly reported, if small-scale studies. And he actually offered a potential mechanism. There are several, but this is one that you could say makes some kind of sense. The atmospheric pressure influences the side of a fish's swim bladder, the organ that allows it to control its flotation in the water, and that would affect the amount of pressure on the fish's stomach. So it would then be argued that the fish would move up and down in the water column to account for the change in pressure, and this could affect the amount of food intake. VanderWeyst study, it's a small scale lab study where they took fish in tanks and fed them food and measured the amount that they actually ate as a proportion of the weight of the fish, and they did it at under control conditions at various levels of atmospheric pressure. And what you can see here, there is a very weak and non-significant relationship. This R squared would be close to zero if there was no relationship between the amount of food taken in and the atmospheric pressure. And indeed, the results suggest, albeit limited by the fact it's a very small study, that there is no relationship. However, by contrast, the effect of water temperature on the feeding activity of fish is rather different. It's the same in that there's lots of speculation and advice in angling books and online fishing forums, but there's actually quite a bit of proper scientific research. What are the possible mechanisms? Well, if you take any angling book that tries to be a bit scientific, it points out that whereas warm-blooded animals need to eat more when it's cold to maintain their body temperature and generate heat, the opposite is true for cold-blooded fish, because as their temperature drops, they don't need to eat so much. So that is why you would expect that to affect their eating behaviour. So here's a study from a few years ago in the scientific journal Aquaculture. The effects of water temperature and dissolved oxygen on daily feeding consumption, feed utilisation, and the growth of particular fish, the channel catfish, a predatory bottom-dwelling species. It's an American study from an American university. It's a lab study where they controlled the temperature of the water relative to the seasonal average. So at that time, they took conditions which were typical for the season. They then reduced it by 3 degrees or increased it by 3 degrees and measured the weight gain over a particular period. And you can see there's a nice clear difference. The warmer the water temperature, the more the fish gained weight. There was a slight wrinkle in that the effects were moderated by the percentage of dissolved oxygen in the water, so they varied that as well between 100% dissolved oxygen and 30%, and the higher temperature had a bigger effect the more dissolved oxygen there was on weight gain. So here was my naturalistic Zander study, which attempted to address these same issues in real angling. Would I see any effects of temperature and or atmospheric pressure on the numbers of fish caught, specifically Zander? And trying to make it as scientific as possible, I kept or tried to keep as many factors as constant as possible. All the sessions were fished in the same lake. All were fished at the same time of day, more or less, between 4 and 9 p.m. They were around 4 hours long. Sometimes I started at 4 or 4:30 or even 5, and I had to finish by 9 p.m. because that's when evening dark fishing finishes at that lake. And I always tried to go to the same spot round the lake or the swim. Sometimes that wasn't possible because another angler would get into my favourite swim, but I would fish close to that and only fished in a small number of alternatives. I used the same rods, the same tackle, the same fishing method and the same bait. Now that is really difficult for an angler to do, because if you're not catching for a while, the standard thing as an angler does is to try changing their setup and experiment. I was very rigid and I didn't do it. It made the fishing sessions a little bit dull if I wasn't catching, because I didn't change anything. And of course, it was the same fisherman, me, on my own every time. More details. Zander season on this particular lake is between October and March. And so given the time of day, all the sessions were either coming up to dusk or actually at dusk and in the dark. I carried out the study over 2 winters, 2017-18 winter, 2018-19 winter, and 40 individual sessions, each on average just over 4 hours in length. It's a lot of fishing, over 160 hours, and I caught a total of 158 zander in that time. Had 236 bites that I recorded, and that meant 68.8% of the bites turned into actually fish that I caught and netted. So reasonable 2/3. So just to get you a sense of what it was like, here's a video, a short 4-minute video of the actual fishing on the lake, a typical session. In fact, I recorded it on the last session of the study, which was on 1st of March 2019. So I've come along to a beautiful 200-year-old estate lake, which is literally a few hundred metres from my house, to fish for zander. It's 1st of March, towards the end of the season. It's very mild. I've come along at 5:30ish to see how I get on. I've caught a lot of zander here, a couple of hundred over the last 2 seasons, but mostly as it's getting dusk or dark, so it's hard to, would be hard to film anyway, because I don't have a powerful light. So again, using my half smelt, dead baiting in the lake. Hooked through the tail, using 10-pound line and a nice bullet weight. They run nicely. I'm attaching it to a 12-pound end trace with a reasonably large size 6 hook. So I'm going to be fishing, again, you don't need to fish a long way out, and I can use a lightweight because I'm only on the bottom of the silty bed of the lake. So I'm just going to chuck this out. 20 metres tops. Straight out. It's actually the kind of distance. I might put my alarms on later. I like to use this setup when it gets dark, these fluorescent glow rings, and these are my, because of zander fishing at dusk, it's nearly 6 o'clock now. I like to use these children's day glow bangles, wrist bracelets. You break them, just get them going. They're a nice weight, a little clip. And I'll put them here, which show in the dark, move up nicely in front of the alarm, so the alarm doesn't even go off. And it's a nice distance, I find, because the zander are quite picky biters, so about a foot's lift they're probably taking it and swimming off slowly with the bait. So it's just starting to get dark, my first zander arrived, 2 or 3 pounds, quite a small one. They're quite spiny. They're beautiful looking fish, I think. Unusually this one swallowed the hook a bit. You find that if you hold them just behind the gills, it's quite easy to get them to open their mouth. And then get the net off their teeth would be good. It's not too difficult usually. Just pop it out, barbless hook. And there we go. Our first zander of the evening. It's a feisty little 2.5 pounder. Rather beautiful. They have nice fins
and I'll put it back in the next door swim superstitiously. Got a fish tugging. Okay, and I don't know if you can see any of this. A small Zander again. He's really quite hard for a Zander. He's coming pretty quickly though. I don't get out, he's in. That's the second one of the night. Had 3 bites. Again, pretty small.
So, what results did I find? You'll have to watch part 2 of this video to find out.